So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, everybody, welcome to another Leaving Young Earth Creationism, this time with David P. Neff. One quick point of administration, which is we will, as always, have a Q&A section, but if you ask a question before then, and it's not a super chat, I will definitely not scroll back up to get it. So you got to either super chat or hold your questions, and usually we can manage to get through all the questions. You don't need to super chat if you don't want to. But yes, if you ask some question early on in this, it's not going to happen. But David P. Neff, or David, as we're going to start calling you, because I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go with, what is that, 4 syllables? No, David is going to be good. So why don't you introduce yourself, tell people a little bit about your, what you do here on YouTube, or just generally where they can find you, stuff like that.
Well, thank you so much, Dapper Dino, for having me on. I know I've been on this channel before, and you've been on my channel. Mm-hmm. I am going to be studying biology at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, starting this fall, and I will be doing a music minor. I am a musician and a science enthusiast. I do quite a lot of things on my channel, mostly open hangouts, after shows, and stuff like that. And do a little bit of talking about music as well. So that's what I do over on my channel.
Awesome. All right, and of course, this is Leaving Young Earth Creationism. So at one point in your life, you were in fact a Young Earth Creationist. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here.
That is correct. I grew up in the Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, the IFB church. So think of the long line of Jack Hyles, Pensacola Christian College, and stuff like that. Hyles Anderson, Sword of the Lord, all of which were highly influential growing up, as well as the ICR, AIG, and to some extent the Creation Ministry International.
Okay. Now, so was this something that you grew up in from as far back as you remember, or was this something that your family started after you had already been growing up for a little while, or?
So this was kind of like what I was already born into. My father was a Baptist preacher, so this is kind of what all of us were already.
Right.
And this is kind of just what I was taught growing up.
Okay. So there was never really a time you can remember when you became a Young Earth Creationist. It's just sort of the way things were from as far back as you can remember, huh?
That is correct.
Okay. So, now, I know that you had asked me about something about accelerated Christian education. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I went to private school up until the end of middle school. I went to a couple Christian schools. So the curriculums that we used were from like at Becca, Bob Jones University Press, and the Accelerated Christian Education. For those of you who are not aware, the Accelerated Christian Education is basically a self-taught curriculum. It's usually for homeschool children, or some churches have a small school where students sit in little cubicles all day and do their work individually. So it's very, the ACE curriculum is very cult-like, I would say. I'm going to see if I can pull up a couple pictures for you. So just to get you an idea of how some ACE schools are run, this is a pretty good picture. Share screen, Chrome tab, ACE school. There we go. So if you could pull that up.
Yep. 1 second.
So yeah, this is kind of the way that the ACE school is laid out. students sat at a desk doing their work individually, and they would go up periodically to score their own work. You can see how that obviously went when you let students score your own work.
I'm guessing a lot of
Never
A's,
a good
huh?
idea. Oh yeah, never a good idea to let your students do your own scoring. So that's kind of the environment that the ACE school was. So ACE is all kinds of bad. I actually have a couple of their curriculum here. So I'm gonna see if I can pull something up.
Okay. Now, and this was an
Um,
explicitly young Earth creationist curriculum, correct?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. They took the Bible very literally, and your science basis is here. So you kind of learned in these type of workbooks called a PACE, Packet of Accelerated Christian Education. You would do your work at the beginning of every PACE. You have to memorize a Bible verse. And you have these little cartoons going on throughout the textbook, or if you can't even call it a textbook, more like a workbook. The pace that I have here is 1029 Science, which is a third grade science
Right.
pace. ACE cartoons. I just want to pull this up just so you can see just the type of stuff that you learn along the lines.
Okay.
See if I can pull this up.
Now, while you're pulling that up, are there any creationist ministries or organizations that this curriculum was drawing from? Was it like it, or that it was being made by?
None that I'm aware of. I think probably just your typical ICR, ACE, stuff like that. Kent Hooven, whenever he said he was a high school science teacher for 15 years, which of course is a lie, he was talking about ACE. This is the textbook that he used. And I know I should have.
How did we find that out?
Because I asked him.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. This is what I was looking for. So it's these type of cards. Let's see here. I think I just lost it. Yeah, here it is.
So this isn't made by one of the other young Earth creationist organizations, right? This is its own sort of thing.
Yeah, this is their this is based, I think, in Texas, but it was it's Tennessee. Here we go. So these are the types of cartoons that you see in these textbooks. I wish I was making this up, but I'm not.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's see here. So yeah, throughout the cartoons, you see that there are a couple of different schools that are segregated by race. So I don't know if that was on accident or on purpose, but those are the type of stuff that was seen. I'm going to kind of share a little bit of what this whole science piece is about. You have your vocabulary words in here and some fill in the blanks. They have, in this one, fight means try hard to win. Oceanium, a place with a large fish tank. Let's see here. Few means not many.
I agree with that one.
Yeah. So whale means a large sea mammal. So yeah, this is a third grade piece, as I mentioned, and this is all about God's created universe. On the fourth day of creation, he created the heavens and all of that. Some places on earth have 4 seasons. And all kinds of bad. tiny animals of the sea. After the fourth day of creation, God had all things prepared for life. To prepare means to get everything ready. When the fourth day of creation, earth had light, air, and water. Earth had soil, plants, and fruit trees. However, earth did not have any moving creatures. God had all things prepared for moving creatures by the end of the fourth day. So yeah, you can see that this is very much taking the Bible to be hyper literally and being taught in taxpayer-funded schools, sadly.
Are those charter schools that this is being used in?
No, not charter schools. Mostly small private schools run by church.
But yours was receiving state funding?
I don't think mine particularly was, but I know some do. Okay. Here we go. Here's one of the things in here about salmon. Salmon are a special and a different kind of fish. Salmon live their part of their lives in freshwater and part in saltwater. Salmon are born in freshwater streams and lakes, but soon travel to the oceans. Before salmon can live in the oceans, they must stay in the river for some time. A male and a female salmon journey a long way and travel in all different directions. And then salmon, now they go back home. So, yeah, and at the end of the case, you have a unit test or whatever that you have to take.
Okay.
That particular one. And there is a page that I have here that's all about debunking evolution and supporting young Earth creationism.
Of course. Now, what grades does this curriculum go through?
K through 12.
Okay. And did you take it for all of those years?
I took it from about 3rd to the end of 5th grade. Let's see here.
How do you self-teach? How does someone self-teach themselves how to read from a book?
Exactly. So the earliest students, I think, are taught by an actual teacher, an actual kindergarten teacher. They're taught how to read.
Okay.
Then you're pretty much on your own. You're teaching yourself how to do math. You're teaching yourself all the science. You're teaching yourself pretty much all the vocabulary, which is very hard to do, especially for someone like myself, which is on the spectrum and also has ADHD. Being forced to sit in a tiny cubicle all day obviously did not go well for me.
Right, and I assume that it's quote-unquote self-paced, but I assume that there's a pace. If you fall behind, that's a problem.
Yeah, so all students had a goal chart that said, okay, today I'm going to do this through this, and that was the goal that you tried to do throughout the week. Here it is, 1096. This is all about debunking evolution and all. But first, I wanted to see if I can find this another monstrosity.
Okay, so you were doing this for 2 school years, I guess.
Yeah.
Or was it 3? 3, 4, and 5?
Halfway through 3, 4, and 5, so basically 2.5 years.
Okay. So why did you get into it and then get out? Was it your parents?
Yeah, so the first, I got out because the school really wasn't working for me. It just wasn't the right fit.
Yes, this is accelerated Christian education. Okay, and so when you got into it, was that just what was the reasoning there?
It was so basically my aunt was a monitor there, and my cousins went to that school, so that's how we learned about it. And here it is. This is exactly what I wanted to find. Awesome. So this is 1033. This science 1033. Just to see. Just want to see what grade. This is also 3rd grade, and here is also all about young Earth creationism. You have your once again, you have your little Bible verse that you have to memorize.
Mm-hmm.
And here, one of the things, Fact means a thing we know is true. It is a fact that Jesus loves us. This is one of the things that is in this particular case. But I really wanted to focus on is this very last part of it, where they are doing, they were talking about butterflies and all of that. And this section is called I Have Two Birthdays. Booker, who is one of the characters in the book, I want you to think with me about the butterfly. The butterfly was not always so beautiful. Once it was a caterpillar, it was not free to fly. It was not free to fly to many parts of the world. In fact, when the caterpillar was in the pupa stage, it seemed as if it were dead. But we are saved in one way. We are dead. We are dead because of our sins. We are sinners. We cannot go to live with God. We cannot be free. Would you like to be free from your sin? Would you like to have a new life? If you would, you need to confess that you are a sinner. You need to trust Jesus to save you and free you from sin. And then, of course, you had a little bit of sinner's prayer in the third grade piece. What a wonderful day! I have two birthdays today. This is a science
And
piece.
do they at least give some kind of overview of metamorphosis in insects earlier in the book?
That's a great question. I do not know.
So that we can at least pretend that it ties into science?
Yes, here we go. It does go a little bit going through stages. So it has the egg, the larvae, on the adult.
Okay.
So it does have at least a little bit of that.
At least we can get some kind of science content in. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I guess it could be worse. Not that that's a very high bar. Okay. Now,
Yeah.
when you got out from doing this after 5th grade, so in 6th grade you were you were no longer doing the ACE curriculum, correct?
Yeah, I went to another private Christian school.
Okay. And that was also a young Earth creationist school?
Yes, it was. And they were they're a good, they're a decent school. I'm actually still friends with the principal there, and they're good people, I would say, but I would it wasn't the right fit for me, and I left after 8th grade and went to high school and in public school. So yeah, this base here, we could have a lot of fun with this base alone. This is 1096, as I was mentioning earlier, all about the evidence for God and creation and young Earth creationism. Evidence for creation about scientific laws, nature, evidence for a young Earth in astronomy, geology, biology, evidence for the flood, Noah's Ark, the fossil record, archaeology, hydrology, and various cultures. So this is the stuff that I just wanted to make sure. Oh, here we go. Did you know evolutionists suppose that the elements found in nature were randomly placed together to form the basic building blocks that formed more complex living organisms? British astronomer Sir Fred Hoyle said, the chances that higher life forms have emerged through the evolutionary process is comparable to the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the material they're in. In other words, it probably is next to impossible. So this is one of the first things in the piece.
Nice.
Here we go. Evolution is the theory that secular scientists have proposed to explain how living organisms first came into being without a creator and how they keep evolving into higher life forms. That's how they define evolution in this textbook.
Well, I mean, you can't define it correctly. I mean, that might actually help people realize that it's not actually very crazy.
Yeah, and this is obviously completely incorrect. This is not the definition of evolution at all.
Right.
So
was this a big part of forming your ideas about creationism, or were those more from church and the next school that you went to?
More so the church and the next school I went to. This is 1096. I believe this is actually 6th grade. So
you didn't really get this one.
This is 8th grade. So yeah, this would have been after I left the AC school. Here we go. I'm just going to keep reading a little bit of this. Secular scientists have also tried to explain the origins of galaxies, stars, planets, and the sun and earth. Their ideas are often presented as scientific fact rather than theories. In many school textbooks, it is an assumption that evolution is a proven fact, when in reality, evolution is only a theory without any actual proof. So there we go. Evolution is only a theory without any actual.
Only a theory is the kind of thing you say when you want to convince people you don't know anything about science.
Yeah, exactly. So right off the bat, we found a couple straw men just right off the bat. That may be why some people find creationism difficult to accept, because they have been taught that evolution is true and have never been told of its errors. So the evolutionary model cannot explain how matter formed with how matter, from which secular scientists suggest everything evolved, came into existence. Oh God, this is just all kinds of bad. We could have a whole field day just with this textbook. Secular astronomers claim that the oldest galaxy in the universe is 13 billion years old. However, they have no idea where the matter came from to make that galaxy. And I really wish I was making this up, but I'm not. The evolutionary model cannot explain the origins of certain scientific laws that exist within the universe, such as gravitation or magnetism. Evolutionists might tell you scientific laws are based on forces exerted by particles with atoms, but they cannot tell you how these forces first came into existence, because they cannot tell you how the atoms came into existence. So right off the bat, we see that they're confusing biological evolution with other concepts and theories in science. So pretty much the Kent-Hovind 6 levels of evolution.
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of creationists like to do this because it helps them set up a false dichotomy between basically all of the scientific consensus, which all stands or falls together, and then creationism. And so any hole they can poke in one part of, or they can pretend to poke in one part of the scientific consensus, will then, by virtue of them having done that in the minds of their audience, cause doubt about the rest of them. So, for instance, if I can convince you that nucleosynthesis can't work, for some reason, they think that will help them convince you that, say, biological evolution can't work, even though those are separate questions, and things could be different about each of them. Like, maybe nucleosynthesis doesn't work. That doesn't stop evolution from being true. Of course, nucleosynthesis does work, but that's a separate question. So, now, starting in 6th grade, you went to a different Christian private school. At some point, did you ever go to a school that wasn't teaching young Earth creationism?
Yeah, that was when I went to high school, to the public school.
Mm-hmm. But did you remain a creationist through high school?
No, I left young Earth creationism around 9th grade. Evolutionary model, here we go. There is no creator. Living organisms somehow came into being without a creator, and these living organisms keep evolving into higher life forms. Again, there's no such thing as a higher life form in biology.
No, there isn't.
So I don't understand why creationists keep making this mistake. Obviously, anyone who knows what they're talking about would tell you that organisms evolve to fill a niche and adapt to their environments. So an organism, well adapted for one environment, is probably not going to be well adapted for another environment.
So what was one of the things that made you end up first realizing that maybe that young Earth creationism wasn't all it was cracked up to be?
Visiting the DC Museum of Natural History was one of the first steps. I've been there many times, and I absolutely love that museum. But just seeing all the different fossils of Homo species of human, Homo floresiensis, Neanderthalensis, erectus, and all of the other primitive life forms and the geological column, realized, okay, something doesn't fit within this young Earth model.
Okay. And so when you started having doubts, did you go to any church members, or was that something that was more of a private journey?
This is more of a private journey. I will mention also that one of the schools that I went to had answers to Genesis, do a couple of conferences after church. So I did go to a couple of the Answers in Genesis conferences.
Okay. And was that was that influential for you, Answers in Genesis? Like, did you consume a fair bit of their content?
Yeah, definitely. And also the ICR. I remember when I was in church, I really wanted to become a scientist to work with the Institute for Creation Research. That was one of the first places that I wanted to work.
Okay. So, now this is around ninth grade. You said that you're starting to say, "Hey, this all the fossil evidence at least is lining up with evolution." So
Yeah.
now there are creationist attempts to counter the fossil record as evidence for evolution. What did you think about some of those attempts?
I kind of found them that they were ad hoc at best. And when I started to try and fact check what they were saying with, okay, we have 99% of the global scientists on one end and a handful of people on the other, maybe they know something that I don't. And especially when I started looking at some of the creationists who are, the evolutionists that actually are Christians, such as Francis Collins, maybe there's really not a dichotomy between that. Let's see here. I wonder if there's anything about dinosaurs in this book.
Now, you had been taught, of course, I assume, but correct me if I'm wrong, that you can't be a Christian and accept evolution. So,
it was one or the other.
was there any discussion about the fact that there were people who claimed to be Christians who also accepted evolution, or did you just was that just kind of skipped over?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again?
So when you were in these creationist schools, was there ever any discussion of the fact that there are people who at least claim to be Christians who are not anti-evolutionists?
That was kind of skipped over. Oh, here's something about dinosaurs in this monstrosity. The word dinosaur means terrible lizard. The Komodo dragon of Indonesia, Earth's largest lizard, can weigh over 300 pounds. The crocodile monitor of Papua New Guinea, Earth's largest lizard, can grow up to 13 feet long. Although they are not dinosaurs, terrible lizards still do roam the world.
Wow, there's some irrelevancy. Here's something about dinosaurs. Let's switch to things that aren't dinosaurs at all.
Yeah.
What are you supposed to gain out of that?
Yeah, I don't know. Here we go. And here's things. Evolutionists deny the existence of human footprints at Glen Rose. They claim that the human footprints are actually dinosaur tracks that have been eroded to the point that they no longer look like dinosaur tracks. I'm sure you know about this claim.
Oh, yeah. I'm also aware that very few creationists still make it because it's such a bad claim.
Yeah. Many of the prints that have been actually human footprints were damaged when local residents needed some money during the Great Depression. Creationist scientists now advise against using the prints still remaining in the Paluxy River Valley as evidence concerning mankind and dinosaurs. However, regardless of these particular footprints, we understand from the biblical model from the Bible that man and dinosaurs were created on the sixth day of creation and did indeed inhabit and walk the earth at the same time.
Okay.
Trilobite was a small animal with many legs and a hard outer shell that lived at marshy areas before the flood. Yeah. Here we go. Has something about mammoths.
So, was you leaving Young Earth Creationism something you immediately were open about with family or church or anything?
Kind of more quiet about it until later. Let's see here.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit. So was that a yes, you were open about that, or no, that was something you kept kind of secret?
Kind of something that I'm kind of more private. Oh, we're going to have a field day with this page. Evidence from biology. this group of exhibits deals with the biological evidence for a young Earth. Why does this exhibit have a model of Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton? This report tells us about the discoveries by a team of scientists in 2005. In 2005, a team of scientists were studying the fossil skeletal remains of T-Rex found in the state of Montana. It contained blood vessels, red blood cells, and proteins that were preserved by the outer bone. So basically, the Mary Schweitzer, who, by the way, is an evangelical Creationist speaking out against them. So it shows chromosomes and DNA, dinosaur DNA, which of course is not correct at all.
So, how long did it take for you to be open with people that you were no longer a young Earth creationist?
Tons of time. Basically, it's more like kind of explaining that, okay, I no longer believe this stuff. This is, I'm completely giving up not only on creationism, but also kind of Christianity. And of course, that was hard for my parents and others to accept. So,
Was leaving young Earth creationism tied to leaving Christianity as a whole, or were those more separate?
more separate. But the more questions that I had about young Earth creationism, the more questions I had about Christianity, and I realized that they could no longer work.
Okay. And so, has this caused any, like, have there been relationships that were lost or damaged as a result of this?
No, I pretty much cut ties with all the people that most of the people that I grew up with, and most of the church people that I no longer speak to, nor do I have any desire to speak to. It has been a pretty long time since I've actually went to a fundamental Baptist church, and I don't have any plans to go back.
Right. Well, it would be kind of what would you do there, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah, and also too awkward.
So, have you ever had any conversations about so basically, when this came out that you were leaving both young Earth creationism and Christianity as a whole, was there anyone who tried to kind of bring you back and give you their best arguments as to why you should either be a young Earth creationist or a Christian?
Not really, thankfully.
Okay.
Nobody beating me upside the head with the Bible.
No. Some Bibles are really good weapons. That's how I judge Bibles, is by basically how good of a thrown weapon or a cudgel they could be. So the bigger, the better. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the Bible says it's a. The Bible says the Word of God is a two-edged sword. So there you go.
Actually, what I really judge a Bible on is how reasonable the translation is and how good the textual notes are about for the textual criticism on the translation. That's how I actually judge Bibles. But
well, same here, and I will say the NRSV and the NET are two of the best translations on the market. Have you ever heard of the NET, the Net Bible, second edition?
I don't think I'm familiar with that particular translation. I'm pretty sure I don't own one.
All right. Well, hold on 1 second.
So while David is getting that, as a reminder, everybody, we will have a Q&A question somewhere between half an hour and an hour from now. And that will be when you guys can get all your questions for David in. If you get in questions now, I will not see them in time, or I won't remember them, and I'm probably not going to scroll up to find them. So now that David's back, go ahead.
Yeah, so the NET Bible is probably one of the best Bibles on the market for footnotes. It has over 60,000 notes about biblical translations and why they particularly translated it one way, why they made the translation, why they left out a verse. They really make sure to note the textual variants that exist within this passage. So for transparency, the NET definitely gets an A+. And I would say pretty much the same thing about the NRSV, specifically the Oxford Annotated New Revised Standard Version. Those are probably the two best on the market.
Okay. Now, so you left Young Earth Creationism in 9th grade, and is that also around when you left Christianity?
Um, roughly about that time.
Okay.
But something because of my family, I ended up going to church until I was 17.
Yeah, I was gonna say like you must have. I assume that they were gonna keep making you attend church, and so
Yeah,
how were you going there long without them knowing that you were no longer a Christian?
yeah. I kind of kept most of it quiet to myself.
Okay, so they didn't necessarily know that you were no longer believing the stuff at church.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a pretty common thing. It's tough to when you're very dependent on your parents to significantly go against their belief system, and yeah, I don't blame anyone for doing it. So you get out of high school, and about how long does it take before you actually are open about this?
Probably until after high school, and once I started becoming uh, going out on my own.
Okay. And so, what do you, looking back, what do you think about the various young Earth creationist voices that were, in terms of like people putting out curricula or putting out books or tapes or DVDs or whatever? Um, how has your perception of them changed since you were no longer a young
Um,
Earth creationist?
well, my perception of those in the young Earth creationist camp, I think most of them are probably liars who know that they are wrong but are deliberately deceiving their audience. I think ACE is one of those people who are deliberately lying to their audience. They know that their audience is gullible, that they will believe what they say, and that they're not going to go back and fact check them. So impressionable 6th, 8th graders who don't know any better, once they see the lies about evolution in their piece, they're not going to go out and try and fact check that. They're not going to go out and see, okay, what does science actually, how does science actually define what evolution is?
Right.
And same way with Dr. Snelling, Jason, and others. Um, nobody's going to go Google Dr. Andrew Snelling and look at the papers where he said, yeah, the Earth is millions of years old. They're just going to see what he published in the creationist literature.
Okay. So, if you could talk to the people who say wrote the ACE curriculum you took, or to any of the creationists you just mentioned, or Ken Ham or whoever, and ask them a question about what they're doing, is there one that you would like to ask them, if you could?
Um, yeah, I think if I were to have a chance to talk to the people who wrote the ACE packet, I would really want to talk to them and ask, okay, you guys are aware that this is wrong, right? You have to know that this is not, by now, you have to know that this isn't what evolution teaches or proposes. So why are you lying to your students?
Yeah, I think that's the question I would like to ask a lot of the professional grade young Earth creationists, because I'm not entirely sure that they don't believe that God created all living things or that the Earth is young. I think a lot of them probably do believe that, but I also think a lot of them know that the details that they're giving aren't accurate, and so I think a lot of
Right.
them are whether they're essentially lying in the service of what they think is overall true, and they think it's okay to lie in order to convince people of that. And by the way, yes,
Right.
as David Pino said in the chat, do smash the like button. I am seeing only 18 likes in here, but we have significantly more viewers. So do me a favor. It does help the channel out a lot. Yeah, so yeah, that does seem to be one of the a big consensus I get from doing these interviews. Is it seems like everyone who's left young Earth creationism seems to think that at least the professional level people, the people who should know better, do know better, at least to some extent.
Right.
But then I also have trouble like getting inside the mind of some of them, because I'm like, how do you say these things with a straight face? And then to some extent, one of the answers is, well, they hire people with relative expertise in one field and then have them talk about anything else, right? Like,
Right. Kind of like that. Like the other day when you were doing the stream on Tweedledee and Tweedledum, a marine biologist and
a chemist.
a chemist talking about dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That they were going to
Right.
miserably.
The only real exceptions that I see are there's a few creationist geologists who actually do talk about geology. So like Kurt Wise and Stelling, they'll actually talk about geology. But they'll also get like Georgia Purdom to talk about geology, or they'll have Nathaniel Jeanson talk about genetics, and it's just like, why? Why wouldn't you have Georgia Purdom talk about genetics? And I think the reason is because she would have trouble saying the ridiculous things that Jeanson will be fine saying, because it's harder for him to know that what he's saying is ridiculous. I honestly think it's because when these people talk inside their field, they have trouble selling the lie.
Yeah, exactly.
But then again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they actually do believe all these things, and they just have weird, fallacious thought processes about this. So, is your family still predominantly young Earth creationist?
Yeah, my family is still predominantly IFB. My mom is Southern Baptist now, but I'm pretty sure if I spoke to her about it, she would probably be in the young Earth creationist camp.
So, does that continue to cause friction, or has your family sort of accepted that, or?
We kind of accepted that and just moved on.
Okay, well.
So I have a pretty good relationship with my mom.
That's good, because I do know of people who've had leaving either Christianity or young Earth creationism, or both, cause them to lose ties with family, in addition to just friends. So it's good that that has not become a problem, because it can. And in fact, we have someone in the chat here who knows pretty closely that a lot of people end up leaving young Earth creationism and doing things like needing to call suicide prevention hotlines and things like that. So
yeah,
it can be a really tough time. And one of the goals that I have for these is to help show that, one, there is life after leaving young Earth creationism or Christianity, although I also interview plenty of people who did not leave Christianity. You don't have to be an ex-Christian to be on the show. You just have to be an ex-creationist. So, but yeah, it can be tough. And the thing is, even if you just leave young Earth creationism, if that's what you were brought up in, it can still cause people to lose ties, because if you look at a lot of like current Answers in Genesis output, it's not directed towards atheists or scientists. It's directed towards Christians to get them to start believing in young Earth creationism. And in many cases, they'll say things like, young Earth creationism is the thing that's the foundation of the biblical teaching and everything. And it's just like, well, okay, I'm not really going to comment on your theology, but do be aware that when you make this a central tenet of Christianity, you make Christianity untenable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the young Earth creationists are harming Christianity far more than they're helping them. The church is bleeding members left and right. There's a reason why Christianity is on the decline in America.
Yeah, I don't think it's doing itself any favors with young Earth creationism for certain. So yeah, it is an odd thing, and actually, I think, I guess one message I would like to give all of the creationists out there is like, if you want Christianity to continue to persist and be a significant force, you're gonna have to stop pretending that it requires you to believe things that are just demonstrably false, and then at least fall back on the things that can't be demonstrated to be false. Because if you want to base Christianity on just flat denial of obvious scientific realities, it's just not going to go well.
Yeah, it's not, and there's a reason why I'm no longer a Christian.
Yeah.
Another big part of my leaving Christianity altogether is when I started looking at the textual criticisms and looking specifically at the Messianic prophecies of Jesus, and seeing how the so-called Messianic prophecies don't really line up to what the Old Testament was saying whatsoever. And one of the things that jumped out at me when I saw like the forgeries and the interpolations into Scripture and some of the textual issues, what it shows to me, what it tells me is that they had no problem changing what they believed the Word of God said. They had no problem adding in stuff that wasn't there or taking away stuff. someone was playing with the Bible, basically.
Now, one thing that I have some of my guests have had was they stopped off at sort of a old Earth creationist halfway house or something for a little bit. Did you ever have an old Earth creation phase, or did you just go straight past young Earth creationism and old Earth and just go right into, well, I guess the science says this, so I'm going to go with it?
I can't remember too much. I think there was a little bit of old Earth creationism in me at one time. So there was a time when I left Christianity. I actually did go towards Judaism for quite some time and converted to Judaism. I still consider myself to be a Jew. I am Reformed Humanist Jew. And for a long time, when I did believe in God, I was an old Earth creationist as well.
Okay. Now, would you still describe yourself that way?
I don't believe in any deity or any creative creation power. So in that case, I would not consider myself to be an old Earth creationist.
Okay, and what was it that made you sort of leave that idea behind?
I guess Occam's razor. Why do we even need a god in the first place?
Okay. Now, when you were an old Earth creationist, were you an anti-evolutionist, or did you think that there was some kind of guiding hand behind evolution?
I basically kind of believe, like Dr. Miller does, that and others, that sure, God created the universe and may have created life, but all the life shares a common ancestor.
Okay. Okay. So, pretty soon we're going to open it up to Q&A, but let's see. So now you do some anti-creationist content on YouTube. So what was your motive for getting into countering creationism?
Well, because it's false, it needs to be countered, and we need to address what they are saying, and we need to show why they are wrong. And I like what Maddie said on my channel. We need to get good information out there.
Yeah. And I think for both of us, as well as a number of other people who do counter-creationist content, I think for a lot of us, we were young Earth creationists, and that's part of the motive for wanting to counter it. Is because, people lied to me, and I don't like it, and I want to make sure that other people who might be being lied to have at least someone out there who can, set the record straight on a lot of this stuff. I do notice that actually with a lot of counter-creationism channels, especially the ones where that's a big focus. There's a lot of, quote-unquote debunk channels that will touch on it occasionally, but the channels where it's a big focus, like mine or Vice Rhino or Apologia, that's all three of us were once young Earth creationists. So I think that's a big part of the motive, is just because we felt that we were being lied to. So,
right.
And it's...
That's interesting. I did not know.
Almost like a revenge narrative, except I'm not like, going out and attacking anyone. I'm like, this is the most polite intellectual version of revenge. I'm going to show everyone just why you are being dumb.
Yep. And I did not know you were once a young Earth creationist.
Yeah, I was. Actually, I was the subject of the first interview on leaving young Earth creationism on this channel. Originally, I was scheduled to be on Bill Ludlow's channel for a show of the same title, but he unfortunately passed away something like a week before I was scheduled to go on. So, the first, the first episode of this was me telling my story about leaving young Earth creationism, and it was done in honor of Bill. So
yeah, I love it. I absolutely love Bill Ludlow, and I still go back to his channel and listen to his content because he is one of the best out there.
Yeah, I actually was fortunate enough to meet him once. That was pretty cool. So me and my regular co-host Benthoven, we got to meet Bill Ludlow. Although at the time my co-host did not know who he was. But yeah, it was pretty cool. But yeah, that is something that I think a lot of the counter young Earth creationist channels have in common. Gutsick Gibbon is the same. She was young Earth creationist. In fact, she has a few videos where she goes through some creationist children's books that she still has. So, yeah, I do think that that's a big part of the motive is that when people find out that they've been lied to, you don't always just create people who leave your belief system. Sometimes you create essentially debunkers to your particular belief system because it's a kind of a personal thing, you know? People that you trusted as a kid were essentially just lying through their teeth to you, or at least it's how it feels. I mean, granted, Ken Ham or whatever, you know, he didn't know who you were. He couldn't have picked you out of a lineup of one, but he was still willing to lie to the whole group of people you were in. And that
Right.
includes very, very impressionable and vulnerable people, like kids, you know? It's not really okay. So I'm
Right.
glad that... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not okay with Ken Ham and others going in and blatantly lying to children. And it speaks volumes that they're going to churches to speak to children and not to science conferences to speak to adults. To
Right.
me, that speaks. They're not going after the professionals because they know the professionals can see right through their crap.
Well, that is one of the things. When you talk to professional scientists who aren't actually active in the creation evolution debate as sort of a hobby, that's all it is for any of them. It's just a hobby. Most of them aren't even aware that young Earth creationism still exists. Basically, the
Right.
only thing that brings it to their attention is occasional like legal troubles with schools and school districts that try to pass creationist legislation.
Yeah, like Arkansas just did. Thankfully, it failed.
Yeah, it did not get. I don't even think it got onto the floor of the Senate. I don't think it. I think if I remember correctly, it like didn't find a Senate sponsor or something. But for those of
Yeah,
you
I
who,
think.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it died in committee.
Yeah, I think so too. For those of you who might not know, there was a bill that passed the House in Arkansas recently that would modify the Constitution of the state to allow for the teaching of creationism in science classrooms. Did not mandate it, which they had already tried and failed. And of course, we know that this would be challenged almost the instant anyone tried to use this permission, and it would almost certainly get thrown out at the. Eventually, it would probably be appealed to the Supreme Court, although it might not even make it that far, because honestly,
Yeah.
local courts might already be like, no, this is silly.
Yeah. So the physically responsible conservatives are setting themselves up for a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that will have to be funded by taxpayers.
Yeah. Well, there is.
So,
So yeah, there is that, which is. Oh well. But I honestly think that it was actually just a stunt by Arkansas House Republicans to just essentially virtue signal their fundamentalist Christian bona fides in hopes to get reelected. I don't
yeah,
actually,
exactly.
yeah, I don't think any of them were actually like, oh yeah, this is totally going to become law, and we're going to get creationism in the schools. I'm pretty sure that they were just cynically using this as a stunt. But then again,
Yeah.
that ties into my opinion of politicians overall. I think most of what they do is just cynical nonsense. So
Yeah, especially some of the anti-abortion legislations, very much virtue signaling, just trying to rally up their base.
Yep. Well, I've said many times I don't think that actual elected Republicans want to get rid of abortion because then what they fundraise on.
Yeah, exactly. And as soon as they ban abortion, they're not completely. They know there's going to be a humongous backlash.
Well, I don't even think that they have any plans to because look, as long as they can say, "Oh, we're fighting abortion," then the pro-life dollars pour in.
Yep, exactly.
Some of them might actually have their own actual moral or ethical objections to abortion, but even like look, when was the last time there was actually a push to change something federally, which is what people tend to care about? It's almost never, and it never really goes anywhere. And then occasionally some state will do something, and it will get knocked down pretty hard by the Supreme Court, even when there's a large number of Republican appointees on the court, because in order to get to the point where you're a federal judge who's even in consideration, you've probably already, consider things like previous Supreme Court precedent to be a pretty significant thing that you're not just going to overturn. So yeah, I honestly don't think the Republicans are even really trying with that. Although I do think some of the local ones will try with creationism. I think that you usually see it though at like school board levels. I think most states have gotten the message that like It's just not going to work at the state level. Your best hope is to make some local school board have some stupid policy that isn't technically illegal, but it flies under the radar for long enough that some kids hear about creationism.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is I mean, it's an insidious kind of underhanded thing, but I mean, what else have they got? And it is one of the things about young Earth creationism that bugs me the most is, like you said, the target audience is not the professionals, the people who you actually need to change their mind in order to change the scientific consensus. Who cares about those people? Let's go after the kids. Because ultimately, what young Earth creationism cares about is trying to keep the numbers of young Earth creationists up. Because they think that will mean that will keep the number of Christians up. When in fact, it will likely do the opposite. I don't know of too many people who... Actually, I have trouble thinking of anyone who was convinced by the evidence that there was a supernatural origin to life and that the universe was no more than, like 6,000 years old. And then suddenly realized, oh, that's what the Bible was saying all along. I guess I'm a Christian now.
Yes, exactly.
I know of many people who've realized that the evidence did not point to that and have left either young Earth creationism or Christianity as a whole. And I know of a few people who joined Christianity, then realized that the Bible said those things, and then found workarounds to try and believe it. Those are the groups that I do know of. But yeah, I don't know of anyone who was independently convinced of the evidence for young Earth creationism and then realized that the evidence therefore was pointing towards Christianity and then joined up, or even Judaism. I have yet to even hear about such a person. If there is such a person, I would greatly like to know, because I would like to have them on to talk about that experience. We could call it joining young Earth creationism.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, if young Earth creationism is true, it should be able to do that.
Yeah, like, you should be able to make testable predictions with young Earth creationism. Well, actually you do, but they all failed miserably. Right. But the thing is, if the Bible was true and all of this happened, the evidence would be overwhelming and we wouldn't be able to miss it. But here we go. The whole idea of God not being a liar, and if God were to exist, he would be we would be able to know things about his creation, and when we start discovering, okay, we have very good reasons to believe that the Earth is old. I think the biggest problem with young Earth creationism is that it is a special kind of pseudoscience, that it is refuted by literally every single fact in the science. If young Earth creationism was wrong, it would overturn every single field of science.
Yeah, I was actually trying one day to come up with any field of science that wouldn't actually end up being invalidated if young Earth creationism were true. The one I came up with was optics, but then it was later pointed out to me that no, in fact, because of the light travel time problem, any creationist solution to that is probably going to break optics too. I was like, okay, yeah, that's true, because it'll have to change the way the physics works for light, which is all that optics is based on. So yeah, I couldn't actually come up with something that, upon reflection, wouldn't break if young Earth creationism were true. Basically, all of science would just be wrong, and not wrong in little ways, but fundamentally flawed in unrecoverable ways that would basically mean we have to start from scratch on almost everything. Yeah. Except that we know that all of the science works, right? And not even the ones that you think are very highly tied to young Earth creationism, like basic chemistry, would have to change if young Earth creationism were true. But basic chemistry gets us lots of chemical products that we use every day.
Yep. And chemistry, of course, with the law of radioactive decay, that would change the entire field of chemistry and physics.
Yep. So I think right now we are going to start opening it up to questions. I do think I saw a couple questions possibly earlier on in the chat. Unfortunately for these, I cannot reliably gather questions beforehand or during the discussion, because I have to keep on top of what's going on here. So if you did have a question before, you're probably going to have to retype it. And of course, super chats go to the top of the line, although usually we don't actually need to really do that. We can usually get through the questions. But basically, we're going to go open up to Q&A for at least a half hour or so. And if at that point we've kind of run out of questions, then we'll close it down. If not, we can go up to an hour. But while we wait for some questions to come in, David, is there anything that you would like to have said during this that you didn't get a chance to?
Not that I can recall. I'm just kind of curious. That whole case of dealing with younger creationism and evolution, I think it'll be fun to do a whole stream or two just tearing those cases apart, debunking accelerated Christian education. Maybe I could scan in some of those pages, send them to you guys, and we can just rip it to shreds. Because there's a lot of content in there that I would really love to respond to.
Yeah, I do think that would be fun, especially with some nice scans, because that way they can be right up there, easily legible, and yeah, that could actually be a lot of fun. Let's see. Smitty asks, why remain Jewish at all? Why not be plain old humanist?
Well, I love Judaism still, and I love the traditions and Shabbat and all of that. So that part of me is still there. And you can definitely be both Jewish and humanist at the same time. And I am a Jewish humanist.
I will say, I do think that humans derive real utility from having things like traditions and rituals, even if they are not something that they believe have literal spiritual or supernatural powers. There's something comforting to have some kind of order to your life, a schedule that you keep, whether it be a weekly, monthly, yearly thing, that there are things that you use to mark different seasons of the year, life events, things like that. And I would say, without getting into the questions about truth claims about God or lack thereof in humanism or Christianity or Judaism, that I appreciate the fact that those things give people that kind of cycle to their life. And I do wish that there was some kind of thing. Actually, this is something that I agree with C.S. Lewis on, where he was talking about, a lot of the atheists, they might have these, great logical arguments and whatnot, but ultimately, what are they gonna give me for following their ideas? Like, do I get to light a bonfire on Darwin Day and dance around it? Is there going to be a harvest festival where I get to eat, delicious foods? And the answer is ultimately, well, no, not really. And I wish there were. I wish there was some kind of calendar of not necessarily religiously tied holidays that actually had cool things about them. Because, what did I do for Darwin Day? Well, I went and talked to a group of students at MIT, which was cool, but it didn't make it feel like a holiday. Like, there were no Darwin Day gifts. There was no Darwin Day tree. There was no Darwin Day vigil where we, read some new scientific paper late at night and then had a feast afterwards or something. But any of those things would make it more interesting.
Yeah, actually, that would be kind of fun. A Darwin tree for the tree of life.
Yeah. I mean, so that's one of those things where it's like, I do actually agree with C.S. Lewis's critique there of atheism, is that we need more. Humans need some kind of ritual and some kind of cycle to the year. But let's see. We have from. I'm just trying to make sure.
By the way, just pointing this out here, the Secular Rev and Fidelis.org just actually published a paper secularizing the rights to passage, basically saying pretty much just what you stated there. I'm going to put a link to that in the sidebar chat as well. And so, yeah, these rituals and ceremonies are very much important to people.
Yeah. We have from Luca Medunio, when is the next debate with SFT?
I don't know.
Yep. I know when my next discussion with SFT is. It's when he stops acting like a child and he answers Erica's questions. That's
and
it.
When he, and when he finally calls out fraud match for his lies, deception, dishonest videos, academic dishonesty.
To me, that is part of acting like an adult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he needs to grow the fuck up. Sorry, and that's our first F-bomb.
Oh man. Oh well. we usually use it up at some point. So, let's see.
Yep.
And Nestle20, this isn't a question so much, but he says about Darwin Day, this is of course because religion has had the power for thousands of years to establish these traditions. Secular tradition, if allowed, could do the same. It probably could, although I do find it tends less to do so. most of the various days that you hear about people tend not even to push for much beyond like having a lecture, which I'm being honest, it's the least interesting part of most holidays. Like, if you're someone who goes to church on, say, Christmas or something, you're not going because of the sermon. Let's be honest. That's
Yeah.
in fact, in most Christian groups, or maybe not most groups, most Christians are part of a group where the sermon is the first thing that gets cut when you need to cut down the length of whatever ritual or service you're doing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's more about the music and the liturgy than it is the actual preaching.
Yeah. Let's see.
Here's a question here for Neff. What actually convinces you that evolution was true? The fact that it works, that we can actually use it to solve real world problems such as virology. We can actually use it to make phylogenetic trees. If evolution were false, and the fact that every single person actually accepts evolution, such as even young Earth creationists that accept speciation, pretty much they all accept evolution, but they don't want to call it evolution.
Yeah. Oh, and
Everyone agrees.
oh, we have a $5 super chat. Please join our initiative to force all of academia to call Allosaurus Saurophagonax for the next 50 years until it becomes the official name. That's from TikTok. I don't know if you guys know about this, but basically, because of Tyrannosaurus, because it actually had a senior synonym, there was in fact a real name that should have been used for Tyrannosaurus, but it wasn't. And because people had been exclusively using Tyrannosaurus for quite a while, a new rule was added to basically the rules for binomial nomenclature. And it was basically if a taxon is a junior, or if a name for a taxon is a junior synonym, but it's the only word that's been used, or the only binomial that's been used for the taxon for, believe it is 50 years, it becomes the new official name. And yeah, it is there because of Tyrannosaurus Rex. But the thing is that it's very hard to get another organism in there because the only way it happened for T-Rex is basically everyone kind of legitimately forgot that it had an older name. And so everyone was going in good faith thinking that this was the correct name for the taxon when it wasn't until after this rule was made. So it's very unlikely that you can actually just get everyone to drop Allosaurus in favor of the admittedly better name, Saurophagonax. But yeah, if you could actually get everyone in the field to exclusively use Saurophagonax for the next 5 decades, it would change the name of the genus Allosaurus. Yeah, but it's just not going to happen. People already know what Allosaurus is. No one knows what Saurophagonax is. So, and the Venerable Beat says, I find lectures fascinating. Thank you very much. I do too, but they're still my least favorite part of any holiday that involves a lecture. I listen to lectures all the time, so they don't feel like a celebration thing, like all the time. So, let's see. So Creative Debunk says, at David P. Neff, can we discuss Jesus prophecies and other Bible content on stream sometime? Or on?
Absolutely, and send me an email and we'll try and get that set up.
So, now that is not something I would normally have on my channel, but I do think it is a cool thing to discuss. So
Yeah.
I
think that was probably more or less outside your what you normally do on your channel.
Yeah, it's definitely outside of what I normally do on the channel. Now, I do listen to things like that, but Dapper Dino as a channel does not actually take a stance on anything about that, unless it contradicts science. Then we got something to talk about. And the Venerable Beat, of course, says that I celebrate whenever I listen to a lecture. That's fair enough. Man, people do not like my take on holiday lectures. That's all right. You don't have to like my take on holiday lectures. You can just be wrong. No, I'm kidding. Now, I will say to everyone, David's channel is linked in the description here, so do make sure that you head over there and check out his channel because he has, like we've said, streams about science, a lot of just relatively open mics. You can come, there's often creationists will show up and, have a discussion there. So now there is a question that I don't know if the person who asks it is here, but it always is asked of all my guests, and so I figure I might as well ask it of you, which is, what is your opinion of pineapple on pizza?
No.
No, not okay.
That might take.
Okay, that is more than fair. It is not my thing either. Yeah, not a big thing. So let's see. Here's a question for you that I have. Do you have any favorite science books that you'd like to recommend?
What was that?
Any favorite books about science that you would like to recommend?
Yes, one of the absolute best books on evolution that I've ever read, called "Evolving: The Human Effect and Why It Matters." Effect and why it matters. I'm going to put a link to the link in the sidebar chat. This is one of the. This is probably the book that kind of set me on the path to eventually study biology. Not only does he go into the evidence for evolution, he actually goes in and later ties into why evolution is so important and how scientists actually use the knowledge from evolution to solve real world problems. So definitely go buy that book.
All right, from Nestlig 20, do you have any favorite shows, current, past, whatever?
Not really. I don't watch too much TV
Okay.
or movie.
Smitty says, talk about how The Legend of Korra is better than Avatar The Last Bender. I will not talk about that because that is crazy talk. I probably don't dislike Legend of Korra as much as most people do, but and I blame a lot of its problems on the fact that it had a troubled production history, right? Like, no one was sure how many seasons they were going to get ultimately out of that show, and of course, each season was considerably shorter than any of the seasons in Last Airbender. So I think that's one of the reasons why the narrative is so disjointed, and why very few plot threads actually follow through from one season to the next. Yeah, so there were some other problems that I don't think can be attributed to that. Like, I don't actually like the story of the first Avatar very much, mostly because it actually it seems at least to contradict or very heavily retcon what was the explanation given for how bending originated in the various nations. Yeah, and all in an attempt to explain away the dragon turtle towards the end of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which didn't really need an explanation, especially not one that broke a lot of the rest. And then, of course, the spirit world was never really portrayed as good and evil in Avatar: The Last Airbender. But then you get to Legend of Korra, and no, it's just black and white, evil, good spirits, which was it made the spirits seem less alien, which I thought was a disappointment, because that's one of the things I liked about them, is that they were this unknowable sort of force that you could propitiate, and they could be useful to you or dangerous to you, but they weren't necessarily good or evil. So yeah, I have my disappointments with Legend of Korra, but then again, it was a fun watch, so Anyway, let's see. Are you going to hold a debate to decide who gets to be the only Neff in the community, David or Nephilim? No, there's no reason to ever get rid of Neff with 2 Fs in favor of Neff with a PH. Anytime you need a Neff with 2 Fs is the better choice.
Yep. At least my last name isn't spelled PH, because that would be really confusing.
Oh, man. We might actually have to make you legally change your name if that happened.
Yeah. So actually, it's quite interesting because I've known about Nephilim Free since I was in middle school. Since he's been doing these things, one of the first channels that I've really got a big dose of evolution about in science was the Potholer 54 channel, who did the old and crocodile awards. And Nephilim Free was often one of the featured nominees for that. And that's also Dawn Exodus 2, also one of the first places I learned about evolution.
Okay. And now the whole chat has just ascended into talking about Avatar. Sorry, guys. And yes, Zahir is one of the best villains in Avatar history. I'm not going to deny that. It's just that the whole narrative surrounding him was disjointed, and that is to the show's detriment. Mostly because you couldn't set him up. It would have been much better if he could be set up in season 1 or 2. Instead, you get to like people just running around like breaking people that you don't know who they are to prison, and it seems like it's supposed to be a bad thing, but why? No one knows. So, question for David from Aztec Dragon. Did they teach you anything on climate and ecological systems in these Christian schools? That is an interesting question.
Honestly, I can't remember.
Okay. Do you remember being a like a climate change denier or anything like that?
Yeah, I did deny climate change at one point.
Okay.
I was skeptical of climate.
Okay. And did that sort of change around the same time as evolution?
Yeah, roughly about the same time.
Okay. For about the same reasons, I suppose. You were just kind of realizing that, hey, maybe science isn't the dumb. Maybe it's right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And by the way, I want to say to Beach Price, sorry that your connection is so rough. I'm just happy, honestly, that it's not on my end, because then it would be everyone who's having that problem.
Yeah.
Let's see. And yes, you can have different plots in each season, but it helps when you can set them up, Smitty, which is why it does feel disjointed, because nothing in the first season actually sets up really anything in the second and third and fourth, so on and so forth. There's really no hints of Zahir in earlier seasons. There's really very little about Kuvira doing anything to reunite the Earth Kingdom or anything. Which maybe that one doesn't need to be super set up, but I had kind of forgotten who she was. So, yeah. Let's see. And am I missing any questions? TikTok can't write today. That's alright, man. I feel like that all the time, especially if I'm using my phone. My phone is terrible for that kind of thing. So, let's see. Now, there's a question. Is your family still a climate change denialists or skeptics, depending on which terminology we want to use?
I don't talk to them about climate, so I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah, I know that feeling. Let's see. And yeah, the kingdom was fractured, but like by the end of season 3, we don't actually have any hint that like, oh, maybe we need to get someone to fix this or anything. And yeah, I don't know. And yes, Zahir was one of the best villains because he actually had some pretty good motives and he had a point, and not everything he was saying was completely ludicrous. And at certain points in the story, you're like, wait, why is he the bad guy? And then, he does things like kidnaps a whole bunch of kids and stuff. So that's why he's the bad guy. Well, not a whole bunch of kids, but there were kids. Like, okay, yeah. Let's see. Do you think that your school friends believe the young Earth creationism to the point that they may not change their minds?
Yeah, I know a couple people who probably were true believing Christians and true believing young Earth creationists. Sure.
Yeah. I do happen to know that a fairly low proportion of the people that I went to church with who are around my age are still young Earth creationists. A somewhat higher proportion of them are still Christians, but it's actually not even that high. I think that church, in part because it was a young Earth creationist church, had a really bad retention rate. Yeah. Like, I do still know a few of them who are still young Earth creationists and Christians, but yeah, most of the ones that I know that I still talk to are definitely not young Earth creationists, and a lot of them have either actually left Christianity or are just not really practicing it and don't really have any strong position about it as far as is it true or is it not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Beach Price says kids get so excited learning science. It's a shame what YEC does to them, and it's true. Actually, there's a lot of really cool stuff that kids can do in science and whatnot. And while learning YEC stuff doesn't necessarily ruin all of it, unless you actually are deeply into science enough to know why it does break everything. But at least at the school kid level, even so, there's still a lot of science that does directly just conflict with that, like things like evolution and stuff. Teaching kids to recognize the differences in patterns between homology and analogy and things like that. You just don't get. And it also tends to stifle curiosity, I think, because if an acceptable answer is, a miracle happened, we'll just leave it at that. Well, okay, but there's no room for further investigation if that's where you're just going to stop it. Yeah, Silver Harlow says lying to people regardless of age tends to put people off. I really do think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people have a pretty strong reaction to leaving Young Earth Creationism, is because it's hard to believe that you weren't being lied to when you realize just how badly wrong it is. It's sort of like when you find ex-flat earthers. It's just like, come on, how was any of this? Which actually, I just found out there's a new ex-flat earther out there. Apparently, Ranty Flat Earth is no longer a flat earther. So
That could be a new series, Leaving Flat Earth.
oh well, FTFE is already covering those, so I will let him continue. And I also think Simandan is doing a little bit of that. So they were both much bigger than I am, so there's very little point in me also covering it.
Yeah, for a long time, I always thought the flat earthers and stuff like that they were just a bunch of poes, that they didn't really believe what they were saying, and they were just a bunch of trolls.
Yeah.
I wonder how many of those are poes versus how many are actually being legitimate.
I'm not sure. Well, so there's a few problems. One is Young Earth Creationism is so far into post territory. It really is. You cannot satirize Young Earth Creationism anymore. Anything that you can think of that is in line with the ideas of Young Earth Creationism, no matter how silly it is, could be actually taken as a serious proposal by Young Earth Creationists, especially the people who tend not to know as much about the actual science. The sort of the lower tier people like Nephilim Free, who I don't think he's ever heard something too ridiculous for him to believe, as long as it confirms his biases. So, yeah, that's one of the things there. But then again, I've known a bunch of Young Earth Creationists, and I still know a few, and they're not insincere. They're just ignorant about it. And so that transition between are these poes or not tends to, I think, happen towards the more professional areas. But then the question comes up, okay, I mean, are you being a poe or just a fraud, or do you actually have just some kind of weird thought process that allows you to believe all these contradictory things all at the same time? I'm not really sure. I do know that there have been some poes involved in the anti-dinosaur movement, where people, creationists who are like, no, dinosaurs didn't exist. We have had some actual confirmed poes there, but from Vandelli 1998, question: which of the anti-science groups do you think is the biggest threat to learning and stuff?
Great question. I am not sure. I don't know. I would assume Answers in Genesis, because of how big they are, and that they actually do go into schools and churches. And I hear more stuff from AIG than I do any of the other creationist stuff.
Yeah. I think AIG is a good answer. I do also think that the Discovery Institute is far more insidious. They like to pretend that they're legitimate scientists doing legitimate science, and when they're not doing their ID nonsense, sometimes some of them are. But I do think that's another one that's a really tricky one, because they run a site called Evolution News, except it's actually anti-evolution news, and so it's
Yeah, I am familiar with that site. I don't know where they actually stand, or if they're older or younger, but
so what was your Christian school? Was it more European centrist? This is from Aztec Dragon.
what do you mean by European centrist?
I'm not honestly sure. I mean, did it focus heavily on like history from a European perspective?
I guess so. Yeah, you could definitely say that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are running low on questions, and it has been about an hour and a half, which is a pretty decent place to stop this. So what I will do now is, David, what do you have coming up on your channel that the people here could check out if they wanted to?
Not planning anything right now. I'm not quite sure when my next video will be out. I am planning on doing a couple of streams with my friend, talking about music, sometime in May.
Nice.
And a couple of other things going on as well. I'm making a couple of music stuff. So that's something to look forward to on my channel. But whatever the next major debate is, I'll be probably hosting an after show or whatever. But yeah. With that, I think this is a good place to wrap up.
The Venerable Bee, apparently I missed one of his questions. The Venerable Bee, get that in there right now while I am giving my what to look forward to on the channel, and I will ask it before we actually get out of here. So let me know what that is. Oh, it wasn't related? Okay, never mind then. Sorry. So let's see. Tuesday, I think it's an Eric with Erica, because we pushed our previous one. If not, it'll probably just be a Kent with Bent. We do have a pre-recorded Kent with Bent in the can. You can watch it now if you're a member, channel member, or a patron, both of whom have access to links to my unlisted videos, which that one is unlisted. This Thursday, I will be mirroring my Flat Earth debate. So if you haven't seen that, or you have seen it and you just want to give me the watch time and the views, that will be Thursday. I don't actually have anything currently planned for a week from today. That might change. Then it should be another Kent with Bent, probably the pre-recorded one on the following Tuesday, followed by what I'm hoping will actually be, following that, there will be a video that I made recently about a Creation.com article. And this, I might swap those Thursday things around. I haven't completely decided yet. But, and then the week after that should be the next update for the Speculative Evolution project. So there you go. I hope everyone has had fun. Thank you very much, David Neff. And I'm sure we will talk again. And everybody, have a wonderful weekend. I think it's still weekend for everyone. Bye, everybody.
All right.
I want to take a little time to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or more. Bob Knob, Bent Hovend, Ian Chen, Chris Love, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bead, Patrick Dennis, and Res Instance. YouTube is a very volatile platform, what with fraudulent copyright claims, demonetization, and the ever-decreasing share of ad revenue on the platform. It is very hard to rely on YouTube. My members and patrons help keep this channel going, and without them, the channel wouldn't exist. If you'd like to join my Patreon, the link is in the description, and if you'd like to become a channel member, that link is below the video. It's the join button here on YouTube. Either way, you'll get access to early videos, an exclusive Discord server, and if you pledge enough, 3D assets you can use in your own projects.